Good evening. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and welcome to Vampire Reviews. As we all know, vampires love to dance. So, Dracula. Old buddy, old pal, the big D, Dracula. As we've discussed before many times, Dracula has been iterated, imagined, and interpreted more times than any other vampire in history. Actually, more times than any other fictional character or story in history. Ever. There is a lot of Dracula out there. Like, you could roll around in Draculas for years and years and still never put your clammy hands all over them. People just love doing Dracula. Over and over and over again. So, of course, there is a Dracula ballet. Well, several. But tonight, we're not just talking any rinky-dink dance studio's rendition of Bram Stoker's classic Gothic novel, but none other than Canada's Royal Winnipeg Ballet, one of the most prestigious dance companies in the world. In 1998, choreographer Mark Godin produced a ballet version of Dracula, set to bits and pieces of Mahler's First and Second Symphonies. Which, if you know anything about Gustav Mahler, just kidding, I don't expect you to know anything about Gustav Mahler, because we usually talk about movies and books here on Vampire Reviews, but guess what? We're in luck. In 2002, they made a movie version of this Dracula ballet, and it is totally different from the live show. So we're going to focus on that version tonight. When the Royal Winnipeg Ballet premiered this production, it did very well. Audiences loved how dramatic and dark it was, the spectacle of it all that defied ballet stereotypes. It got tons of praise for its striking sets and gorgeous costumes and its super cool, flashy special effects. There are so many positive reviews out there talking about how awesome it is for being so much more than ballet, but also a true work of theater. The ballerinas aren't just dancing, they're also acting. Wow. Which, condescending much? Anyway, Dracula the Ballet was so successful in 1998 that the company has brought it back many times over its 20 years of seasons since, taken it on national tour, and one producer fell so in love with it that it became her passion project, her obsession, to get it turned into a movie. And who did she want to make this movie? None other than Winnipeg's own hometown hero, experimental art house film director, Guy Maddin. Now, there are 3 things you should know about Guy Maddin. He has absolutely zero interest in dance. He does not like Dracula, and his filmmaking style is super weird. Like, his movies are really strange and artsy, you guys. Roger Ebert once called him Canada's poet laureate of cinematic weirdness. Nobody in their right mind would go to Guy Maddin and expect him to just film a stage show and make it look anything like the original ballet. And when this producer approached him with the project, he was like, no, I am not your guy. I'm not gonna sell out. Besides, he was working on other things that year. But then his project got postponed, and suddenly he was broke and starving and desperate. So when the producer asked him again if he would reconsider Dracula, he gave in to the darkness of vampires and stuff. And a little over 4 years after the ballet's premiere, he delivered the Guy Maddiniest movie anyone could ever wish for. It is a black and white silent film shot on Super 8 and 16mm and edited in the 1920s German expressionist style. And it has been called the most inept dance film ever made. I mean, this producer had to know what she was getting into, right? Guy Maddin is notorious for this stuff. If you try to watch this movie for the ballet, you are going to be severely disappointed when all of his auteuriness gets in the way of letting you even see most of the dancing. I'm fairly proud, Maddin says, of having taken it as far away from the stage version as I did, and slathered my DNA all over it. Slathered. Yes, it hits all of the big points on my how to know you're in a Guy Maddin film bingo card. Black and white, check. Indulgently uses retro cinematic throwbacks, check. Features Winnipeg, check. Oodles of melodrama, check. Chock full of repressed psychosexual desire, check. Oh man, if Isabella Rossellini could dance on point, I'd have me a bingo here. I've never really liked Dracula, the story, Guy Maddin says. Of all the horror movies I loved, Dracula bored me the most. It's been reduced to such uninteresting elements. After all, it's been redone so many times, how could yet another Dracula movie, dancing or not, say anything fresh about Dracula or vampires that hasn't been said before? Well, damn it, he was broke and starving, so he was going to find a way to make Dracula interesting. He turned away from the story's cinematic legacy and went all the way back to the source for inspiration. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the Dracula story, get with it. I mean, it goes like this. Jonathan Harker, a proper Victorian English chap, goes away to Transylvania to sell Count Dracula, a creepy foreign weirdo, a house in England. While he's there, Dracula's harem of sexy lady vampire brides try to seduce Jonathan, much to his proper English horror. Meanwhile, back in England, Jonathan's girlfriend Mina is hanging out with her bestie, Lucy. Lucy is the most virtuous and innocent of proper Victorian rich girls. And when Dracula gets to England, he hits that. He hits that hard. She turns into a wanton, voluptuous vampire seductress, much to the dismay of her 3 boyfriends. Yes, 3, all properly repressed Victorian gentlemen who fear female desire. They call in Dr. Van Helsing, who diagnoses her with a case of the vampires and prescribes cutting off her head to cure her soul. There, she's properly innocent again. Headless, but pure, the important things. Meanwhile, Dracula turns his pointy, sexy attention to Mina. Oh, but she's specialer than Lucy because she's the smart one. A modern, progressive woman who's into technology, like typewriters. So he forms a psychic bond with her. And the 5 virtuous, noble heroes of man propriety use this to track Dracula down and slay him. Mina is saved from becoming sexy, everyone is scarred for life, and we all learn a valuable lesson about pitting traditional values against modernization and progression. What that lesson is has been interpreted as positive or negative in both directions over the century of Dracula scholarship and reimaginings that have come since, but that pull of old values versus new is central to the themes of Dracula, whether it's applied to technology or sexuality. And we've already discussed the character of Lucy in great depth and the various ways women are treated in Dracula interpretations, including her portrayal in this movie, in this video, right here. Click the button, watch it again. But though Guy Maddin does some refreshingly interesting things with Lucy, what most piqued his imagination was the portrayal of the men, Dracula himself and the 5 supposed heroes. He saw a lot of himself in Lucy's 3 boyfriends especially, his worst self. I was really taken by how easily I could identify with all the men in the book, he says, who are angry and jealous just as I've been to extremely uncomfortable degrees when a romantic campaign just doesn't go your way. And I realized the key would be to retell the story from the point of view of the jealous males. Unlike the way they've been portrayed in almost every other Dracula movie, Maddin doesn't see these guys as noble, virtuous heroes at all, but as jealous bitches who can't handle that their woman is into this dark, mysterious, sexy foreigner. They want to demonize their rival, and of course, blame the victim. Yeah, this is a very you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about situation. As far as Guy Maddin's concerned, the fact that Dracula is a vampire doesn't even really matter. He's just a symbol. Lucy discovering her sexuality through him is enough for the boyfriends to propagandize Dracula as an evil force, even without the literal vampiricness. The novel is epistolary, after all. How do we know all the letters and diary entries aren't from unreliable narrators? I don't even care if Dracula really exists in the story, Maddin says. He's something that's invented by every jealous man. He's the perfect lover. The fact that the women in the story are having metaphorical sexual fantasies about a foreigner, an immigrant, gives the jealous, emasculated men something further to latch onto and propagandize against as a way to build their own sense of superiority. To the Victorian English, anyone from Eastern Europe was considered exotic and foreign and strange, but the book's depiction has also even been criticized as an anti-Semitic portrayal. The ballet makes Dracula even more foreign by casting a dancer of Chinese descent in the role, and the company has made an effort to cast a person of color for Dracula in most revivals of the production, while all the other dancers are usually white. But Guy Maddin took it even further in his movie by adding these silent film era titles at the opening to beat the audience over the head with the ideas. And though we'd love to think society's progressed from the racism of the Victorian era, the fact that this film came out the year after 9/11, amid a wave of anti-foreigner and anti-immigrant propaganda in North America, makes it an especially relevant and timely entry into the Dracula canon. And with everything that's been going on over the past couple years, I'd say even more topical now than in 2002. And all this is rather hyperbolic in the film, but that's deliberate on Guy Maddin's part, and brings us right back to my bingo card. It's always been his personal ultimate goal as a filmmaker to make people laugh and cry simultaneously. And he loves melodrama as a means to this. Melodrama and hyperbole allow the audience to have uninhibited reactions to rather horrible subjects, while still enjoying the campiness of it all. Maddin also thought it would be delightfully ironic to make a mean-spirited ballet instead of something pretty, like most people expect from such a highbrow art form. He's making fun of the fact that eroticism has ever been equated with horror. Dracula even now has a coffin full of money just to further emasculate the Englishman. Not only does he give your girl carnal desires, but he's richer than you too, and he's really gonna shove it in your face. The immigrants are robbing us, stealing our women and our gerbs. And does Dracula even care about this money? He's not spending it, he's just tossing it around, flaunting that he has it, and you don't. Besides adding in title cards with quotes from Stoker's novel, Maddin also includes the psychiatric patient Renfield, and Lucy's invalid mother in his version. The mother is here as an allegory for the undead, kept alive by this steampunk bubble machine that's framed ominously like something out of a retro sci-fi horror. It represents the repressed Victorians' terrors of technological progress, tying back into Dracula's old versus new themes. Because when technology progresses, then women will, want rights and liberation and may even start wearing pants. In my day, we let old ladies die outside of steampunk bubbles like God intended. And patient Renfield is here to mirror the orgasmic fervor the women seem to experience at Dracula's bite. Poor Renfield. He wants the D so bad. D is for Dracula. Everyone's sexual desires are exaggerated in this film. Even when Lucy's boyfriends are giving her a blood transfusion, it's made sexual with all this thrusting. Blood in vampire stories is just a metaphor for other bodily fluids, after all. And the fact that they look so smug while they're doing it, while she's unconscious, emphasizes their feelings of emasculation at how vivacious the vampire's influence makes her. And Van Helsing is the worst of them all. He's shown as a downright pervert. sniffing women's garments, stealing Lucy's private diary, his hands and eyes wandering as he examines her. But it's okay for men to experience sexual fantasies. Women, though, not allowed, not okay. So, as Guy Maddin puts it, cut off her head so she can't think about them anymore. Fill her mouth with garlic so she dare not speak of her fantasies. And cut out her heart just in case she actually falls in love with the object of these pornographic reveries. Guy Maddin's developed a lot of self-awareness since his days of identifying with the jealous suitors. And he shows just how ridiculous he thinks this mentality is with comedic sound effects as Van Helsing decapitates Lucy. Cartoonish color effects, and the ridiculous expression on his skeezy face. These splashes of color added to the film are part of that retro expressionist style, but the use of red in particular deliberately strengthens Maddin's message of psychosexual repression. Red is associated with both romance and virility. And when we see it in Dracula's eyes and the lining of his cape, he is all the more sexually charged compared to the washed-out Englishman. At the end of the movie, Van Helsing leads the four cuckolded men to Dracula's castle to kill him and all the threateningly potent sexual desires he represents. They destroy him with their own phallic weapons and mount his body on a stake to form the shape of a cross. Proper Christian repression will squash out all unholy sexiness. Christian immortality trumps vampire immortality, apparently. And then, at the very end, we see old Per Van Helsing stashing away Mina's underwear in his coat. Whew, female sexuality is back beneath the cloak of the patriarchy, hidden where it belongs. Right in there with Lucy's diary full of sex fantasies. This is a far cry from the badass superhero so many other Dracula interpretations like to make Van Helsing out to be. He's a comedic old man in the novel, but still supposedly a hero. But in this film, even his first introduction is so sinister. With an entrance to make you wonder, is he actually the true villain of this story? The movie's subtitle is Pages of a Virgin's Diary. And though Lucy's diary gets a brief appearance at the beginning, it's actually Jonathan Harker's diary that features much more prominently. This is another insightful play on expectations. Most people would assume the titular virgin would be a girl, because society has conditioned us to value virginity in women and disparage it in men. But then it turns out that the main virgin with the diary is just another one of those jealous, bitter, nice guys that Maddin wants to be mean-spirited to. In Stoker's novel, Mina says things like, "I have tried to walk in meekness and righteousness all my days," and is presented as merely an unwitting victim of an evil spirit. But in this version, she's instead much more inspired to her own sexual agency. She reads Jonathan's diary, which details his sexy encounter with Dracula's brides, but it doesn't make her jealous. No, it actually turns her on. She's all like, "Wow, Jonathan, now that I know you're into this stuff, let's go." Just so much as reading about it is enough for the vampire to extend its corrupting influence over Mina, and she becomes sexually enlivened and even aggressive in her desires. Because sex equals corruption? See what happens when we let women read? But Jonathan's like, "Oh no, I want you to be a properly pure and innocent girl." So she's like, okay, if that's what it takes to keep my man, and ties up the diary in a symbolically repressive nun's veil for him. But Jonathan's still like, "Bye," so Dracula swoops in and carries her off to his gothic dream house. I mean, we should have known Mina and Jonathan's marriage was doomed to trial and tribulation, with how much their nun ballerina ensemble was foreshadowing it by evoking serious Martha Graham Appalachian Spring vibes here. Appalachian Spring is an iconic ballet from the 1940s about a newlywed couple learning life is going to be much harder and darker than they anticipate. And these dancing nuns here are channeling it hardcore. Guy Maddin cut a lot of the dance out of his movie, and minimized what portions of it we can see on screen, but what's there is still really cool referentially and vampire-wise. For instance, much of the choreography is fairly classical ballet, fluid, and graceful. But when the vampires show up, the dancing turns avant-garde and angular in a more modern style. Under Dracula's influence, Lucy walks with her arms stretched out, but not in a palms and forearms up way of supplication as we'd see in traditional ballet, but instead like a zombie puppet thing, showing the vampiric control. And later, when she's a full vampire and trying to seduce her suitors in the tomb, she puts on an innocent show of classical romantic ballet. But when it doesn't work, she shoots her legs out in this jarring, extremely untraditional motion that represents her change, her progress into a liberated woman. A blood-sucking creature of the night. Ha ha ha, is there a difference? And even though these men are here in the tomb to murder her, she still has them supporting her in these dramatic lifts, exerting her newfound power over them before they succeed in squashing her back down to where she belongs. This juxtaposition of dance styles aligns with that struggle of old versus new values central to Dracula's themes. The vampire's influence corrupts the traditional ballet. Corrupts? Or makes it awesome. The same goes for the music the ballet is set to. Gustav Mahler was Bram Stoker's contemporary, so his music is time period appropriate for the Dracula story. And his first and second symphonies are rather foreboding and mysterious sounding to fit with the vampire-y darkness. But there's much more to it than that. Even if you're not into classical music, you'll probably recognize some of the melodies here. Yes, that is Frere Jacques. Mahler was writing music at the very end of the Romantic period, looking back at his predecessors from the early Romantic like the great immortal Beethoven and other composers who wrote on this huge scale. And he wanted to make statements on the seriousness of music. By tossing children's songs and other strange choices into his grand dramatic symphonies, he was being ironic, kind of a musical troll, making a point about the ridiculousness of people taking the classics so seriously. It's still producing something beautiful, still showing a reverence to the classic styles, mixing nostalgia with a fun musical commentary. Just like Bram Stoker pitting traditional values against social progress in Dracula. It was a thing to do at the time. And also the thing that Guy Maddin still does in this era, and has been doing since long before he got roped into making this movie. His weird, artsy, retro filmmaking style is actually kind of perfect for Dracula. Ballet is already dialogue-free anyway, so why not go ham on the silent movie expressionism? He says he doesn't like making modern-looking films because film isn't real life, and modern movies try too hard to look as real as possible. They might as well not be art at all. I have long loved the way the style of older cinema asserts that it's not trying to replace or represent reality, he says. It calls more attention to the artifice of film, and therefore to the decision behind each sound effect. And it might actually make you think about why it's there. And Guy Maddin wants you to think. When he was criticized for adding silent movie-style intertitles to his most inept dance movie ever made, that they were bringing people out of the ballet, he said, "Bringing people out of the dance? They're dancing. It's not real life. People don't bite each other and suck each other's blood, first of all, and second of all, they wouldn't dance about it if they did do it. It's art. You're not fooled by a painting in the museum. You don't try to climb into it." That the technology of film interrupts and disrupts and corrupts the classical art of dance is perfectly thematic to Dracula. And yet, this film also draws the viewer further into the dance by incorporating the camera into the choreography. By extension, the audience becomes part of the ballet, thrust into it, unlike with the live show where they view a full, flat stage. Like Bram Stoker, and Gustav Mahler, and Mark Godin, the ballet's choreographer, Guy Maddin wants to make a point about the way people sentimentalize lies about the past. The way progress is often demonized, while still paying reverence to what they do all love about the classics in a somewhat tongue-in-cheek way. Even though this film looks like it might be something that could have been made 100 years ago, Maddin says it might be the most digitally driven movie ever made in Canada, and the most expensive Super 8 movie ever, because of the modern techniques and technology he used to recreate that old style. And although black and white silent films seem quaint and classic to us nowadays, believe me, when filmmakers were going about it back in the day, they were the ones getting criticized and ostracized for corrupting traditional art and values. And don't even get started on the Expressionists. It really never ends. I'm the Maven of the Eventide, and there are a lot of interpretations of Dracula out there. Which one should we examine next? Thank you so much to my Patreon patrons for supporting my videos. If you would like to help me make more vampire reviews, please join my Patreon. Oh, and if you are interested in the highly scholarly academic pursuit of vampires as fictional metaphors for social issues, I have put together a handy list of resources for you. This Amazon storefront lists a lot of the vampire reference books I use to research my episodes, along with tons of other books that I wished I owned. Or if you just like watching vampire movies, I've also got a page up there for all the ones we've talked about here on Vampire Reviews, along with some other truly awesome lists, like ones focused on death and Phantom of the Opera, because, come on, it's me. So take a look at my Amazon storefront and do some vampire-y holiday shopping. Surely it will only make you all the more popular with your friends.